A blinding flash swallowed the city. In less than a second, 80,000 lives vanished. Most never even knew what hit them. The blast within a kilometer left no one alive, except for one man. He was just 100 meters from ground zero, where the temperatures reached over 4,000 degrees Celsius. He survived by one extraordinary coincidence. This is the story of Eizo Nomura. It's just after 7 in the morning. Japanese radar operators detect several American aircraft heading towards southern Japan. In Hiroshima, air raid sirens echo across the city, a warning for citizens to take shelter. But by 7:30, observers spot only single B-29, high above the clouds. It's a reconnaissance flight. With no bombs falling, the alert is lifted at 7:30 a.m. Nearly 350,000 people continue their mourning. Streetcars begin their routes. Workers head to factories. Students gather for class. None of them know that this was the last air raid warning they would ever hear. High above the Pacific, at 31,000 feet, the Enola Gay, a B-29 bomber, is carrying a weapon unlike anything the world has ever seen. The bomb was nicknamed Little Boy, but it was anything but small. Weighing over 4 tons and stretching 3 meters long, it carried enough destructive power to dwarf every conventional weapon used before it. At Hiroshima's fuel hall, Eizo Nomura, a 47-year-old employee, arrives for work. Like every morning, he joins 37 colleagues for routine assemble on the second floor. But that day, something was different. His daily documents weren't on his desk. Normally, a co-worker brought them from the basement. Today, they had been forgotten. Nomura glanced at Miss Hirose, a colleague he might have asked for help, but she looked busy. He decided to fetch the papers himself. 3 minutes later, 8:15 a.m., the bomb bay doors opened. A 10,000-pound uranium bomb codenamed Little Boy began its 43-second fall toward the city. Inside the bomb, a small piece of uranium was split apart by a single neutron. This caused a chain reaction, releasing an enormous burst of energy. Nomura had just reached the basement. Then, a blinding flash. A fireball nearly 300 meters wide bloomed above the city. Its heat at ground level exceeding 4,000 degrees Celsius, it detonated 600 meters in the air, a deliberate choice to spread the blast across widest possible radius. The roar was deafening, like the sky itself collapsing. The building shook as if the earth was splitting apart above ground. Everything within half a kilometer of the hypocenter was vaporized. Roofs peeled off. Bodies were thrown like rag dolls. Clothes ignited instantly. No one even had time to turn their head. Across the city, the heat was so intense that it etched human shadows into stone, dark outlines where people once stood or sat, their bodies shielding the stone beneath from the blast-white heat. The person who left this mark never moved again. Within 4.5 kilometers, destruction was near total. Between 4.5 and 11 kilometers, damage and injury were widespread. And even beyond that, broken buildings and flash burns were reported, almost 20 kilometers away. But Nomura was underground. The basement with thick concrete walls shielded him from the fireball's heat, the blast wave, and lethal burst of radiation that flooded the city. When he regained his senses, dust was raining down. Nomura touched his head. It was wet with blood, but he was alive. The basement was in darkness, filled with debris. Slowly, he forced his way up to the first floor. What he saw was beyond imagination. The city was gone. Buildings he had passed that morning were now skeletons. The Chamber of Commerce, the Industrial Promotion Hall, all in flames. The world he knew was gone. Streets were filled with smoke and silence, broken only by faint cries for help. In every direction, the city burned. A place once alive, now turned to ash. Nomura moved toward Motoyasu River, stumbling through fire and rubble. At times he had to throw himself to the ground to avoid burning debris. At that moment, he thought he would die. And just before darkness overtook him, the faces of his 4 children appeared in his mind. Somehow that memory kept him moving. Later he learned that out of the 37 people in Fuel Hall, he was the only survivor. Everyone else gathered for the mourning ceremony above him was gone, but Hiroshima was not the end. The US had already planned to use 2 bombs, and Japan still had not surrendered. Before the bombings, the US dropped millions of leaflets on many Japanese cities. These papers warned people that big attacks were on the way. Not everyone received them, but they still caused a lot of worry and uncertainty. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, another weapon, Fat Man, was carried toward Japan. Unlike the first bomb, it had already been tested and would become the blueprint for modern nuclear weapons. It was fueled by plutonium, heavier, more complex, and more powerful. Nagasaki wasn't even supposed to be the target. The primary target was the city of Kokura, home to one of Japan's largest military arsenals, but clouds and smoke from earlier bombing runs made it impossible to aim. The bomber turned away and moved to the secondary target, Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb exploded 1,650 feet above the city with a force of 21 kilotons, even more powerful than the device used on Hiroshima. It detonated almost directly above the Mitsubishi factories, the industrial heart of the city. The blast tore through the narrow valleys, obliterating entire neighborhoods in an instant. By the end of 1945, the combined toll of both bombings exceeded 200,000 lives. 6 days later, Japan announced its surrender. World War II was over, but a new era had begun. The world had entered the atomic age. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima was never tested before it was used, and only about 1 to 2% of its uranium actually fissioned, yet it still produced the explosive force of roughly 15 kilotons of TNT. Modern nuclear warheads reach between 100 and 500 kilotons, several times more powerful, and the largest ever tested. The Soviet Tsar bomber released 50 million tons of TNT, more than 3,000 times the force of Hiroshima. Today, more than 12,000 nuclear weapons still exist across the world. Even a fraction of them would be enough to destroy human civilization many times over.